This is Brooks Carter, and I'd like to welcome everyone to another Human Development and Leadership Division webinar. We've been busy. It's been a while since we had a webinar, but we've been busy. As Marilyn mentioned, on our website, on the home page, you can find the latest primer, which is by Kimberly, which supports this webinar. It's a terrific piece. Something unusual about it, it has an appendix, but the appendix pages really didn't work in the 5.5 by 8.5 format that we do the primers. So we just put them online, and there's a button on the website, and there's also a link in the primer that you can get to the appendix, which you probably already have if you're at the webinar because you've got the handouts that are downloaded. On an even larger scale, we've sufficiently completed a body of knowledge that we're preparing a 15-week course in leadership that will lead to a certificate, not a certification, but a certificate. And you can find out all about that on the website. Again, that's ASQ HDANDL, because ampersands don't work on URLs. So it's asqhdandl.org. Go there, find out about the leadership training. There's a new page on the website called Body of Knowledge that is really the center for that information. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn, who's going to introduce our speaker.
Thank you. Kimberly, can you please put up the slide with your, let me start with the session logistics. So today, I'm sure you've already noticed that all the attendee lines are muted. However, if you have any questions, please type a question into the question box, and we will either save them for the end when we will have a 15-minute Q&A session, or if it's really critical, I will stop Kimberly and hand her the question. So hopefully we'll have lots of questions, and we almost always have a very lively discussion at the end of the session as well. Next slide, please. So I want to introduce you to Kimberly. Now you can see when you look at this slide her very stellar qualifications, but I wanted to talk about Kimberly because she is a colleague of mine. We both worked at Merck for 10 years, and we overlapped for 7 of them. And I want to tell you that at Merck, Kimberly was one of 3 people in what was once a 100,000 person organization who had the kind of change credentials to be considered an expert, senior, super change management person. And Kimberly got involved in a lot of the global, large change initiatives that we took part in Merck, that Merck initiated. And she has a very unique perspective. So even when we're working on a small project, you can always count on Kimberly to give you that change management perspective that is right to the core of the issue. I've loved working with her. She's a good friend, and I know that you all are going to really enjoy what she has to offer you today. So with no further ado, Kimberly, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so very much for the kind introduction, Marilyn. I so much valued our time together, too. It really was fun. And I am also enjoying sharing that experience now with an even broader group of change leaders around the world. So very, very happy to be with all of you today. So what we're going to talk about here today is about change leadership. And I recognize that most of you, if not all of you, are in functions like quality, operational excellence, Lean Sigma. But I hope to shift your perspective a little bit today to also help you see yourself as a person who's driving and leading change inside organizations, and to help you think through a couple of powerful ways both to drive results in the organization, but also to accrue some benefits for yourself, to increase your, what I call your professional net worth. And we're going to talk more about that term and what it means. As Marilyn said, I was at Merck for many years. I led the corporate change practice there. Today I own a company called Ignitum, and I offer change leadership training and resources and coaching. And so all of the material that you see here is really the, from the inside of my company, the kinds of things that I do to work with organizations. I did a really quick scan before we started today of the attendee list, and we just have an amazing list of companies represented here, large and small, in all sorts of different industries. So I'm excited to be having a conversation with you, and I'm going to be sharing some stories from my own experience. And so I hope, based upon the diversity of folks that we have here today, that these are going to resonate for you, and you're going to see yourself in some of these challenges. So we've got a couple of learning objectives for today. We have about 45 to 50 minutes or so. We're going to cover a lot of ground, so please grab a pen. If you want to be able to take notes and fill out the assessments as we go, get them printed out as we're getting started here. A couple of objectives. First, I want to share with you the big picture. What's going on in the broader landscape of change management? We've been talking about change management for well over 10 years now. So how's it working? How are people using it out there? I want to contrast that to some other levels of change capability, including change leadership. Second, to talk about this concept of professional net worth, which relates directly to you and your contribution, and help you to evaluate at a high level your professional net worth and if you're satisfied with where you are at professionally. And then in terms of the third objective, I'm going to share with you tonight the 7 strategic engagement skills. We're going to go through all of them, but we're also going to go deep in 2, maybe 3 of them, depending upon the amount of time that we have. In part 2 of this workshop, we will go through the remaining strategic engagement skills and talk about some deeper action planning that you can do around those. But tonight we're going to go over all 7, go deeply into 2, and we're also going to assess along the way how well are you doing in that specific engagement skill, and we'll create a pattern diagram to kind of get a sense of where your strengths and where your development opportunities are. Okay, so we're shooting to get to about here today, and then we'll pick up at the next section the remaining engagement skills that we didn't cover tonight. So let's first talk about the objective number 1, this business about what is the landscape of change look like out there in the marketplace. And obviously I spend time at lots of different companies, and so I have a perspective on where we're at in terms of change management these days. And from my perspective, the bar has really been raised in the last couple of years on building change capability, both in our companies and personally, individually. And when I talk about change capability, I trust that you already have all of the technical skills that you need to do your job in your discipline. Here, I'm specifically talking about the people side of the projects and initiatives you work on, the changes that you drive in the organization. So let me give you some examples here. So first, one way to evaluate how much change capability an organization needs is to look at the level of business uncertainty or tumultuousness going on in the marketplace, right? How much churn is going on in your industry, and the level of results that you're expected to get in your organization. Because even though the level of business uncertainty may be going up in some sectors, in most sectors actually, in many cases, the level of results expected don't go down or remain the same. They also go up, again, at least based on my experience. And so there are some companies out there that are using ad hoc change management techniques. And as I'm going here, think through where your organization might be on this scale, as well as where you are on the scale. We're going to do an exercise around that in a moment. But just try to think through the messaging here and start to get a gauge on where you think your company and you are at. So companies that are doing ad hoc change are really just doing basic tactics around the people side of change. They're not doing much more than communication. The people who are doing it tend not to have very much visibility, and they tend to be really tactical, just sort of a pair of hands. Where a lot of companies have progressed to over the course of the last couple of years is towards change management. And many companies that are building change management capabilities, you can see that they've got a modest level of capability and a modest expectation about results. They've typically made some investment in a common tool set and are working towards preparing the organization for change. Professionals who are doing the change work, the people side of change, sometimes they're role players, they're people whose jobs it is to do change, but in a lot more cases, it really falls to whoever owns and manages the project to understand the people side of the change. Sometimes there's a project management office that's helping to bring some skills and some tools into the organization, but they tend not to be very integrated with quality management, process management. It tends to be sort of a standalone capability that's not very well integrated. In addition, the folks here are skilled, but don't necessarily have a very deep amount of knowledge in change management. They really do rely heavily on tools, checklists, and things like that. At the next level is change execution, and here organizations have a significant level of turbulence that they're dealing with and pretty significant expectations for results. They tend to have project management and risk management capability that's integrated into their projects. The practitioners at this level tend to possess a pretty good depth of change skills and are positioned at mid-senior levels, maybe even senior levels in the organization, and are pretty good at partnering with the business and providing expertise and feedback on the people side of change. And the business accepts that, so they don't feel like they're having to roll the rock uphill. They're partnering with the business and sharing their expertise and feedback. And here you can see this is based more on capabilities that are respected as opposed to just sort of bringing a toolkit. Folks here are working on behavior change and human risks, and the organization is accepting of that input. When you get to change leadership, here you're really focused on deep behavior change, and you need to, because you need to be able to act quickly in an environment where there's a lot of turbulence and a very high expectation for results. Even though we have seen some progress in change execution and change management over the last 10 years, the challenge is that they tend to be somewhat slow. There's an emphasis here, for instance, on preparing the organization and building skills, which is all good, but many organizations need more than that. They really need to get results quickly, and they're trying to focus on getting people to change their behavior at an accelerated pace. And so the key here is really around influence, where you've got those sponsors truly engaged. You're not having to push them to make changes or act in the right way. You are coaching them to do that. They're accepting your coaching, and changes begin to happen in a much more organic way in the organization. And the change, the people who are leading the change do it in such a way that it doesn't feel as clunky or mechanical as it might down here. It flows a little more smoothly because there's less reliance on tools and those kinds of things, and more about how people are acting their way to a better set of results. And finally, in change acceleration, I don't know many companies in this space. I think the best examples would probably be companies like GE and IBM who really understand how the innovation machine works, how they can take customer expectations from outside the organization and translate those into solutions quickly internally. So change acceleration is really about companies who know how to change fast. They have mastered the behaviors that it takes to change. In fact, they do it so well that they're not afraid to initiate a large amount of change in the organization because they anticipate what's coming. They know how it works. Here are the people who are leading changes, like us. We're not just good at having the technical skills and the expertise and the influence, but we are really on equal footing, eyeball to eyeball with our clients in terms of our business acumen, such that they take our input on a wide variety of challenges that they're facing, not just the people side of change. And this is really where we start to to become the trusted advisors that we hear lots of folks in business talk about now. So my purpose in sharing this with you is to give you the broader context and get you thinking about, first, where your company is, and second, where you may be in this mix. So what I ask you to do, if you haven't already, is to have a look at the Change Capability Gap Assessment. It's one of your downloads. And we want to do two things here, three things actually. So first, we want to establish, as you've been hearing me talk, what level of turbulence, what level of business uncertainty is your company experiencing right now? Go ahead and put a check where on the continuum at the level of business uncertainty that you're having to deal with. And also, sort of what are the level of results? And they might not line up perfectly, but what I'd like you to hone in on here is, where do you think your company needs to be on this capability continuum? So go ahead and figure out what you think is required based upon the business realities and the results that you need to get. And as a second step, where do you think you actually are today? Where's your company today? So if we really need to be operating at a high level of uncertainty and delivering a high level of results, but actually we're operating somewhere down in this level based upon the criteria that I shared with you, go ahead and strike a line here. And again, this is obviously non-scientific. This is based upon your own impressions of your organization. You may not have all of the information you need. But what we're trying to establish here is there an area of opportunity? Right? Is your company currently operating at a certain skill level, which is not going to provide the results in the environment in which you're working? And is there a gap there? The reason that I ask this is because you can potentially play a very significant role in closing this capability gap. But obviously, it depends upon where your capabilities are. All right, so let's back up for just a minute, and I want to ask you a couple of questions in a poll and sort of get a sense of where the group is at. So first, what do you believe is your organization's current level of change capability? Let me move this over so you can see the screen. Oh, so it looks like it has removed my... So do you think you're down here at ad hoc? Do you think you're at where it's really just mostly communication, change management where it's mostly tools, change execution where it's mostly risk reporting, change leadership where it's mostly about influencing behavior change, or change acceleration where your company's already nailed this. Your sponsors know how to lead change, and you're really effective at integrating the customer requirements from the outside and quickly creating solutions. So the results are coming in, 60% of the votes so far. And it looks like most of them are stacking up around change management. So to give you some feedback on that, that's pretty common. There are many companies that, and there are quite a few ad hoc here as well, there are many companies who are just discovering some of the benefits of basic change management and who are just now starting to make investments in. I do business with a lot of companies who are interested in a turnkey approach to change, and it's quick to implement, and you can get people up to speed, and you can get tons of benefit from it. For those of you who are already doing change management, I think there's great opportunities for you here as we work our way through the course, because we're going to talk about how many change management techniques have been really helpful, but I still find a lot of people who are managing change saying, we're still not getting the results that we're looking for. And my belief is because we're leaving out those influence mechanisms. We're focusing on the tools and the data collection, but where we really need to be focusing is on influencing behavior change. All right, good. So the next question is, we're mostly around the ad hoc, and so I'm guessing we're gonna see a pattern that correlates closely with that, but is there an area of opportunity between where your company's change capabilities are today and where you think the required level of capabilities are to achieve the results in whatever environment you find yourselves in? And we've got half of the people voting, and we had no. Oh, we have a 2%. We have one no. But clearly, you're saying that there is an opportunity there, that we could be doing more. So that's fantastic. So we've got close to 90% of the votes in, 85% in. So I'm going to go ahead and close this one. And let's go in and talk about you. So remember, we said there's an area of opportunity. You can play a role in that. So let's think about, what level are you currently operating in individually? And here, this is, hey, I'm just using ad hoc, I'm just using basic communication, change management. I'm using some tools. Maybe I get a little help from a change manager every now and then. Change execution. This is where you're really starting to understand, hey, I know a lot about how human behavior works and how to get other people to change. And change leadership, you're working at very senior levels of the organization in terms of persuading and influencing people at the highest levels of the organization to change their behavior such that it's consistent with the changes that they want to bring about in your company. And finally, change acceleration is if someone, a business leader approached you, there would be no distinguishing you from a business leader. You look, talk, and act exactly the same as a very senior person in your company, with the difference being you're essentially an expert in change management. Okay, so we've got about 3/4 of the votes in, and this is pretty common pattern too. So you may remember organizationally, we said a lot of us were down there around ad hoc and change management in terms of where our organization capability is. What we pretty frequently see is that people who are working on projects, quality folks, Lean Sigma leaders, operations folks, people who are working on projects tend to have a little bit more skill than the broader organization. And obviously that's good, because and I'm going to close this poll now, because if we're looking to position you to drive better results and increase your professional net worth, obviously we want you to be ahead of where the organization is, and not just by a little bit, enough that you can really coach people and help to move them forward. The other issue, though, I think that it's important to bring up is, we're not trying to make you into a change accelerator overnight. First, because it takes a long time to get here. It takes, people who are up here in this space, these are very accomplished people who have been working in change leadership for a period of time. Sometimes people who are working at this level, it can be frustrating to be working in an environment that's very ad hoc, where there isn't an appetite for the work that you do. And so we want you to be far enough ahead of the organization where you can coach them, get great results for the organization and for yourself. But recognizing that when you get really far ahead of them, you really need to start to think about, am I in the right place? Am I doing the kind of work that I want to do, right? Because the gap becomes so large that it can become an issue. So the fact that most of your companies are in ad hoc and change, and you're a bit ahead of them, I think is right where we want you to be. So let's start now talking about the concept of professional net worth. One of the things, and Marilyn talked to you about the time that we spent at Merck, we coached hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of belts and change management folks when we were there. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I really noted, the pattern that I saw, was that, and not just at Merck, in other places too, but in coaching people, the further they move up this continuum from just knowing basic tools to really being able to influence human behavior, is that their stock goes up. And I don't mean their company stock, but I mean that their value as a professional on a couple of dimensions. So in addition to helping your company move up and get better results along the way, there are also many advantages for you. So when we talk about professional net worth, here is what I mean. Professional net worth is a snapshot in time, a measure of your professional impact, influence, and income at a given point. And the reason that it's time dependent is because your assignments may change, your boss may change, your company may change, and all of those obviously those environmental factors influence your value in the organization. But there are also individual factors such as your skills and your ability to influence others. And so what we're going to do in a minute, I want to give you an example of each of these, and then we're going to, I'm pulling out my assessment now. If you could go ahead and download, if you haven't already, the handout that says Professional Net Worth Assessment. I'm grabbing mine now, and that's where we're going next. So first, just to put a little bit of definition around each of these, impact is really about the level of tangible value, the contribution you deliver to the organization in either dollars and cents or in other currency that the organizations value. And so, for instance, if you're leading a $1 million, a global initiative that's going to have $1 million of global impact versus a $50,000 departmental project, that's a higher level of impact. So that really has to do with mostly your financial impact in the organization, but it could also be other intangibles in terms of things like company reputation or growth or things like that. Influence is the extent to which you're able to persuade others to behave in ways that get the outcomes they said that they want. So I think we have all experienced that situation where we're working with a champion or a sponsor who says they need to reduce, their target is to reduce costs by 10% year over year, and yet the way that they behave, the way that the decisions they make, the way they allocate resources, the way they work with their leadership team, etc., are really inconsistent with that goal. Even though you may be helping to streamline processes and make refinements to the business model and restructure the organization and take out costs, all of those things are consistent with the goal, but they're doing things that are inconsistent with it. And lots of times, change management doesn't give us a way to address those behavior issues with our sponsors. And so influence is really about being able to influence at senior levels, and having a network of people that you can work with to influence broadly across the organization. And finally, income. I use the 3 I's just because it's an easy thing to remember. But income here is broader here than just the dollars and cents that you're making. That certainly is part of it, right? Money is a motivator to some degree for all of us. We've all got to pay our bills, and we all want to be compensated fairly for what we do. But professional net worth defines this more broadly as rewards you value in general, right? Are you getting back from your company something of value for the impact that you are delivering? And do you think that that relationship is an equitable one? So this could be things like flex time, assignment to a specific project that you want, the ability to take time off when you want. When you have a higher level of influence and a higher level of impact in an organization, it gives you the ability to ask for things and to accrue benefits for yourself that lower performers simply can't ask for. And I'll tell you, I do a lot of work with talent management organization and change leadership. The competencies associated with change leadership are gathering a lot of momentum. Companies all over the world are integrating change leadership competencies into their leadership programs and into their definition of leadership. And so to the extent that you can master even some of these skills and differentiate yourselves from your colleagues, it gives you a significant leg up in being able to deliver better results and accrue better things for yourself. So let's take a quick professional net worth assessment. We're at about 7:35, so we're going to go through this one quickly. In your company, have you earned a reputation for consistently delivering major results? Right? So do people know you as a go-to person on big stuff? Do your executives treat you first as a business leader, not just someone who's driving a project, doing process improvements? Do they look at you eyeball to eyeball as a business person? Are you finding that you have to really sell yourself in a lot? And it's hard to get into the major initiatives. You really have to sell your ideas to your executives, and you have trouble getting into those really big, important, complex initiatives. In terms of influence, How are the politics going? Is that one of your strengths? Do you have a network that can help you navigate all of the stuff that inevitably comes up on large disruptive projects? Do senior executives in your company treat you as an objective and trustworthy advisor? So are they pulling you in, asking for your input? Do you have their ear? Are you able to influence them? Do you know how to shape your sponsor's thinking and behavior to get what you need from him or her? Sponsorship is always a challenge on the big initiatives that we do. How is it going? Are you able to get what you need, even if it involves difficult conversations? And then finally, in terms of income, are you getting the recognition from leaders and peers that is confirming for you that your work there is valued? Or is it something you have to go looking for or just goes lacking? Is your comp at or above the level that reflects your true contribution? Again, I think all of us would always like to make more money, but if we have the honest conversation with ourselves, are we being compensated equitably based upon market for the work that we do? And are you able to get those other things that you value because you're such a high performer? Are you getting those monetary and non-monetary rewards? Are you able to negotiate those things for yourself because of your contribution? So take a minute and sort of sit back and look at the patterns that you're seeing and ask yourself, am I where I want to be on this? Is there an opportunity for me to move up this curve and contribute more to my company, but also accrue more benefits for myself at the same time? If you're saying to yourself, yes, I think there probably is, that really is about what this webinar is about. The 7 strategic engagement skills are the skill set that you need to move from sort of traditional change management, Google a tool and, get an impact assessment or a communication plan or whatever you want, to working more closely with executives to influence them to align their behavior such that you get the outcomes that you need on your project. Totally different way of positioning your role, okay? Much more strategic. So the 7 skills that we're going to talk about here are storytelling, positioning, alignment, facilitation, coaching, engagement, and accountability. You notice that none of these are technical skills, right? These all have to do, and I know Marilyn probably remembers this, but in some of my past presentations, I used to have one of those circles with the line through it over top of soft skills. I think soft skills vastly diminishes the power of the 7 skills and what these can bring to your repertoire of skills. These skills are not difficult to learn or use. On the other hand, you need to practice them and apply them well to get the results that you want. So real quickly, the mandate, the 7 skills are the 7 things that you need to do. You need to know how to act as a coach. You need to position yourself so that the great services you provide can actually be used effectively by the company. How many times have you gone to someone and made a suggestion and they just said, no, thanks, I don't think I really want to work on that now. And you saw it as a huge opportunity. Positioning yourself so that your services can be used are hugely important. Aligning leaders to make rapid decisions. This is one of the most important things that we need to do, and it is one of the biggest stumbling blocks that I find for folks who are leading change. Spontaneously helping other people facilitate their issues, leveraging influence and persuading people through others. So, sometimes you can't get to the workforce you're trying to help change. You've got to go through levels of management. That's a much harder task to persuade levels of managers than it is to be able to go direct. But as you work on bigger and bigger assignments, you're going to have less and less access to the people that you actually want to change. So you need to learn how to do it through other people. Getting people excited about the change from a distance, even though it might not be favorable for them. Mobilizing people to take the hill, get through it, get the results, and move on is a really important skill, as is creating deep accountability. How many times have we tried to extricate ourselves from a project only to find that we either needed to stay with it and babysit it for a long time to get the results, or that we had to keep coming back because it really hadn't been internalized by the organization. So these are the 7 things that you need to learn, and each of the skills is storytelling, positioning, alignment. Each of the skills reflects one of these. The challenge is it's not that easy to become a change leader. A lot of belts, master black belts, OpEx folks say, this is kind of a missing skill set. Like, no one told us about strategic engagement skills when I was certified. Where were these things? And the fact is that there isn't a lot of behavioral science woven into execution disciplines, including project management and risk management and other things. It's something that I'm going to share with you and show you how you can weave it into your problem-solving processes. Also, lots of people say, well, so who's going to teach me? I'm not necessarily comfortable going to my boss, either because I don't think she knows the right answer or I don't want to appear as if I don't know. I can go to my peers who I like and respect, but probably they're just going to go Google it and give me the answer, so I'm not really sure that I'm comfortable with that. I can go to a consultant working in my company, but it's not always in their enlightened interest to share information. So, you need to find someone that you can rely on to be objective, to share information with you. None of us has enough time or resources to invest. Lots of times it's not integrated. There's a lot of people out there who want to get ahead. And I think the biggest one of everything on this list, you might need to make some changes in how you think and how you work in order to move up that capability curve, right? And so it may require some changes on your part. And that one, I think, is one of the biggest ones that means there are actually so few of these really great change leaders, but it's also really, really worth your time to become one. And I tell you that from a very personal perspective because I did it. People I know have done it, and there is a proven path that you can travel, and that's why I have chosen this as my niche, because I really believe in it, and I think people get a lot of benefit out of it. Most people I work with, you say, I'm feeling stuck. I'm not feeling like I'm getting as much value as I could be. I'm always having to find projects. I don't have the time. It seems like harder than it needs to be. And so I felt like this for a few years early in my career, and I really spent a lot of time figuring out how to get things done in organizations through people. And what I found is that most of the time, the way we're engaging with them are keeping the way we think about it, it's keeping us stuck in the status quo. But it is possible to do the work you love, to make really good money. Some people have aspirations to do things that change the world. You have the ability to do those things. And as I say, it's a perfect time to learn this stuff because the bar is going up and not everybody is going to be able to make the trip. And why not you? Right? So might as well learn the skills. So here's the 7 elements approach. This is the heart and soul of my practice. You will find no citations in here talking about Kurt Lewin or Carl Jung or any of the other big thinkers in the last 50 years of behavioral science, but it's all in here. My belief is that if you wanted to be a behavioral scientist, you would have done that when you went to college, and you didn't. So my thought is that most people now want the minimum they need to be successful, right? They want to learn where to apply it and how to apply it, but they don't want to become psychologists. And so I really have worked on this for the last 15 years and have done the research and boiled it down to 7 things that you need to do to really be able to influence change on a large scale. And you're going to see pieces in here of balanced scorecard and of Sigma and of change management and of project management. But the whole methodology fits on a piece of paper because I believe that people want things to be simple and intuitive. I think a lot of the major change methodologies are racing to get bigger, but their utilization is getting smaller because people don't have time to learn it all. And so this is intended to be the shortest route to get the best results. At this point, it would be good if you could pull out the 7 critical elements assessment. There are 2 pages to that. There is one page that has 7 questions, and there is one page that has a graphic that looks like this. These are part of the broader set of training that I do. We can't go through 35 questions here today. We're barely gonna get through one or two, but I want you to know that they all fit together and support one another. So the big message here is, no matter what methodology you're using, whether it's PMBOK or DMAIC or DMADV or CDOV or whatever, you're going to go through a process to solve a problem. And so what you're going to do to drive change is relatively the same. This is the one that I use in my business. What's different and what sets you apart as a change leader are these 7 strategic engagement skills. And I'm just going to roll through these quickly because we already talked about them. But early on in a project, when you're working closely with your sponsor to understand, what are we trying to accomplish, you need to be really good at storytelling. As you start to bring more people in and have steering committees or a leadership team you're working with, you're going to get into politics, and you need to know how to disentangle that and help people make decisions despite their different perspectives. You need to be able to facilitate, and I don't just mean standing at a flip chart facilitating Kaizen. I mean understanding team conflicts, how to surface solutions, and how to keep, if you have multiple teams working on a portfolio, how to keep them moving in the right direction. In terms of working with the middle of the organization as the change is going out and down, knowing how to use other people's authority and influence and persuasion to get what you need done on your project. So you may not have any authority. However, somebody does and is in a position to influence people to make those behavior changes. This is the technique of figuring out how to use that. Engagement, how to energize people and make sure that they're supported as they are changing their behaviors. Accountability, how to get agreements from people that will keep the results coming, and how to hand off projects such that they sustain their results. And finally, really the one that sits in the middle of this, because you touch every one of these people who's involved, you are in the middle of all of this, oftentimes you might only be the only person representing the customer's opinion, helping the sponsors to understand the political landscape, working with the leaders. And so here it's about getting yourself positioned so that you've got air cover and you are getting mutual feedback with your sponsor or your champion. You've got a working agreement in place. But again, all this sounds great, but many of us will need to make some mindset and behavior changes in order to be able to do these things, right? This is an old hat. You may not be working this way today. So I see we're at 7:49, so I'm just going to go for about 5 more minutes to make sure we have time for questions, and I'm hoping that we can get to at least one of the skills. Last point around the methodology, it aligns really easily. All of these methodology, these problem-solving processes are stage-gated. And for a long time, I really had this argument with myself about, as I pulled this methodology together, does it need to be stage-gated? Can we ask people to stop if we have not hit a certain deliverable as we're moving through the change? And I believe that human behavior doesn't work that way. It's much more dynamic than that. And so this really is helping you to make judgments about what's the most important thing at any given time, and to look at the patterns. For example, here, you may need to work with your leader if you have an inexperienced sponsor, you may have to work with them for a long time on their behaviors, and you think that everything's fine, and then you'll have to come back and work with them again and again. And you may find that you have a leadership team who you don't have to work with for that long and just touch base with them periodically. But you see there's a lot of white space here. Many change methodologies say you're always supposed to be working on everything that is within this one stage gate. And people are not willing to wait. And the methodology itself can cause resistance. And so the idea here is use something that's very just in time, that you have a planning horizon, you've got an idea of what's coming, but where you spend your time and focus your effort is really based on assessments that you do along the way instead of trying to do everything at once. And notice that these things align perfectly with the other methodologies that are out there. So let's just do one skill set for tonight. And when we come back in a week and a half or so on the 21st, we'll work through the other ones. But for right now, I want you to I want you to grab a pen because I'm going to share 2 stories with you, and I want you to take a couple of notes on what you're hearing, and then we're going to go to Q&A. So I once worked with an organization that was implementing, and it wasn't Merck, although something similar to this happened at Merck. They were implementing an ERP at the time. It was JD Edwards, and I was working with 2 vice presidents. I was an organization effectiveness person, and so I had one VP who was really, resistant to anything I had to offer. I was trying to work with him. He stood up on the stage in a town hall, and the screen behind him just had 2 or 3 bullets. He was giving his quarterly update, and this is what he said. So imagine you're sitting in the auditorium listening to this. Capture a couple of adjectives about what you hear. So, as you know, our company's been having some problems. We can't track orders. Customers are angry. Our products aren't getting delivered on time. We've got a lot of returns, and we're incurring tremendous inventory expense. And all of this overhead is impacting the cost of our products. So something finally had to be done. As you probably know, we've been struggling with this for a couple of years, but upgrading JD Edwards is really not something we wanted to do. It's something we have to do. And many of you were here. It was a lot of hard work to implement the system last time, and we're going to need to rebuild a lot of the processes that we put in place. Some of us in the very room worked on these last time, if you remember. But this time we're going to focus on the upgrade of the sales and operations planning, inventory management, and account receivables modules, along with a few other processes, at least initially. So, like always, I'm counting on every one of you to get it done. Pat's going to get in touch with you in a couple weeks to talk about the plan and the next step. And thanks for your time today. I'll see you soon. So take a minute, if you would, and chat into me. What's your impression of what you just heard from that vice president? What's your reaction to hearing about the need for this JD Edwards upgrade in the way that he said it? Go ahead and chat me in a couple comments now, if you would, please. Fernando says negative connotations. John says sounds like an ad hoc change management effort. It does. He doesn't need it or want it. Fact-based without recognizing past contribution. Good one. Sounds like we're forced into it, and that's all. He doesn't sound engaged in the change. Absolutely. It's a very discouraging message. Negative environment. We're in trouble, but I'm not really clear how to get us out of it. He feels forced. Had no influence on me whatsoever. Unhappy. Being told what to do. It's not the fault of the management. It's, oh yeah, you all need to work long hours for a year or 2. Yes, absolutely. I got that from it too. Problem, angry customers, you need to do it and I'll see you later. He's not committed. He's resistant. So negative. So I'd love to get to all these. Thank you for chatting them all in. But obviously not great messaging to start off something that's probably really big and important and is going to cost the company a lot of money in order to improve quality and costs and all those other things. So let me tell you what the second guy did. And again, if you could please just take a moment to write down your comments. Marilyn, I'm going to move through this quickly and then we'll go to Q&A, okay?
Works for me.
So the second vice president does something completely different. Here we go. I'd like to introduce all of you to Narita. Narita is one of our customers. She's 4 years old and she lives in Guatemala. She uses one of our products and it dramatically improves the quality of her life. Her family doesn't have very much money and they have to sacrifice to purchase this product for her. The challenge is that they live in a remote village and their lives are difficult. In fact, our products can literally only make their way to her on the back of a donkey. And when we produce the product, we don't know how to plan for how much she needs. We think it takes 6 to 8 months to get there, though we're not entirely sure, and it's very costly. So we want to fix that. And I see a day where we can get Narita what she needs on a reliable schedule and at a price that's not burdensome. And it's going to be a challenge, no question about it. But I think that you'll all agree that this little girl and our other customers too are worth the effort. the quality of her life is in our hands, and I would really appreciate everyone's support on helping her. Pat's going to get in touch with you in a couple weeks to talk about the plan and next steps. And he waves and walks off the stage to applause. And some people were actually very emotional. So share with me, if you would, your impressions of what's different about, what's the same about this? Did you hear any similarities? And what's different about it? Steve says, focusing on the customer right off the bat. Absolutely. Relating us to customers' lives and how we can improve them. Malcolm says, I'm in. Very personal, big time call to action, engaging and caring, motivating, empathetic. He told a story. Thank you, Jamie. The reason why is clear. He connected on a personal level. It was really kind of Andrew said, it's a let's step up together. Great story. Let me ask you this, though. Did he convey some of the same business facts? Did you hear things about sales and operations planning and about quality and about inventory and about delivery times? Did you hear those same things in there? Yes, you did. Thank you. I'm getting a couple of yeses here. So the idea here is we're not trying to change the business facts, gloss over the business facts. What we're trying to do is take what we all love in this profession, right? Data. We've all got some statistics or analysis background, right? We love our data and we're great at tables and charts and graphs. And I think sometimes we delude ourselves that we're telling a story when in fact we're not putting a human face on it that's highly compelling, right? It's really hard for an executive or anyone in the organization to deny this person's experience after they've heard that story, all right? So when we come back next time, we're going to get into the assessment that I shared with you a couple minutes ago. We'll go through each of the 7 elements, starting with storytelling, to help you build your skill sets in each of these 7 areas so that you can help your initiatives be more successful and also accrue some benefits for yourself. So we are going to see a video next time, so I do hope you come back and you join us for that one. And in the meantime, Marilyn, I'm not going to do the summary here, but maybe we can just move to some Q&A. And if there's anything that I can answer for you, I will absolutely be glad to do that.
So right now we are just 1 minute away from our end time. However, if you can stay a little bit, Kimberly, can you stay a little bit?
I absolutely can.
Please, if you have any questions for Kimberly on what you just heard, please type them into the question box, and we'll entertain them. So, Kimberly, while we're waiting for questions, there was a term you used that I really kind of made me smile, and that's mutual feedback. The mutual feedback you can have with your business leaders. How do you go about setting up a climate where you have an opportunity to have that kind of mutual feedback? Are there some things you can do or some approaches that you like to take?
Definitely. So whether you're working with a new sponsor or even a sponsor that you have worked with before, I always recommend that at the beginning of an initiative that you start off with a working agreement. And a working agreement is really about how are we going to work together over the course of this initiative. Some people call that contracting. I really don't like that term. I don't like to be contracted with. I find that it makes me feel like I'm being pushed into a corner. But working agreement is really a much more eyeball to eyeball way, no matter the difference in your job titles or your positions, to say, we're going to be on this assignment together for 6, 8 months, maybe even a year. How are we going to work together? And one element, and it covers the basic things like the housekeeping of when are we going to meet and what are we going to talk about. But I used to ask, is it okay if I give you feedback? No one ever told me no, by the way. But what I do now is I just say, it's going to be really important for us to be able to give one another honest feedback about how things are going and how each of us can fulfill our role on this project what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with that? And again, I never get a no, but I get a much better read from the executive on whether they really are going to be willing to do that. And even if they're not, I always see I take it as an opportunity when I'm working with an executive who doesn't know how to be a really good sponsor, to help them give me feedback and to help them accept the feedback that I'm giving them. But early on in the relationship, just bringing up the subject of mutual feedback is a way to open the door, so that 3 months down the line, when you really need to give them important feedback, you're not doing that for the first time. You're not going in cold. You've already talked about how you're going to give each other feedback. So that's my recommendation.
Thanks. We have a question from Diane, who says, as a senior professional, I'm finding that your business managers are intolerant or threatened by coaching that experienced change agents can bring to the table. How can this best, young business managers, I guess she wanted to say. How can this best be overcome? You're dealing with the younger generation.
Yeah, so, I think it's making it all about them, Diane. I think sometimes, and I am guilty of this myself, let me tell you, I used to be the queen of tools. Marilyn will tell you I had one of the biggest tool sets in the company, and I was so proud to come in and offer my coaching. And you know what? They don't want it. No one wants to feel that you're there to help improve them. And so really it is about starting, not leading with the methodology, not leading with the coaching, but starting with what's the problem you're trying to solve, and here's the value that I can bring to the table. Here's a skill set that might be helpful to you. We're going to talk in one of the modules also. There's a really good little book called Helping by Edgar Schein. It's this tiny little book, but it's about talking to people in a way that they are willing to accept your offer of help. So I would recommend that you get that and scan through it. It's chock full of good advice and interesting examples, but from the get-go, I think it really needs to be about them and how you have a specific skill that can help them get what they want.
Is that the correct spelling that Diane put on the question list? Edgar Schein?
Schein. And if you go to the handout, the notes page, there's a list of books on there that also references Edgar Schein.
Great.
There he is right there. Edgar Schein, Helping, How to Offer, Give, and Receive Help. Great little book. Good question.
Brooks, do you have any questions that you wanted to ask Kimberly?
No, this is terrific. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
One last question, and then I think we'll wrap up. I'm pursuing and proposing the company focuses more on building and improving leadership skills. I found resistance from upper management when suggesting different sources. How can I break through?
So Fernando, so you are helping. You want to find resources for them to improve leadership skills, and your upper management is not on board with that. Is that the issue?
Correct.
Okay, so it's a tough one when there is no pain or discomfort when leadership doesn't see the issue. Obviously, it's really hard to influence in that environment. And so the best advice that I can give you now is to create linkages between leadership capability building and business outcomes. I have a list of sources on coaching that I can share with you, some citations about how some leadership how some leadership programs can increase capabilities so that managers get 20 or 30% more productivity. And with the addition of coaching, for instance, that number goes up to like 80%. So I have a couple of those that I could share. But my suggestion would be to get some business facts around the relationships between leadership development and business outcomes. There's a good resource, Chief Learning Officer Magazine. It's a free online subscription, and Human Development Quarterly, I believe it is. You could go there and just do a little mining for some I think that you need, for senior leaders that don't see the value in it, you need to create that connection between leadership development and sales growth, revenue growth, and productivity and efficiencies and reduced costs, right? You need to focus on how developing leadership capability relates to bottom line results, because leaders who resist change leadership, typically that's I find the only way to really kind of break through. So best advice I can give you in the moment.
Great, Kimberly, thank you. So how would you like to wrap up, Kimberly?
So Marilyn, I just thought maybe we could remind people, or you could remind people about what's coming next, and I just set the slide up for you.
Yes, so please don't miss part 2, because we're going to get very deep into the different behaviors and skills, the 7 skills that Kimberly has been outlining today, and it's kind of where the rubber meets the road. So come back.
And I have more stories for you.
We can go further than that. Bring a friend.
Absolutely.
Because we're gonna post the recording of this webinar very soon, and they could watch the first part and then come to the second part.
Great idea.
And let me please point out to you that July 21st is a Tuesday. Normally we do this on Wednesday, but July 21st is a Tuesday, so don't miss it because of the date.
Fernando, maybe you can get some of your senior executives to show up.
There you go.
Good job. Thanks for the feedback, Steve. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Bye-bye.